But let's turn our attention to the main story that we're watching closer to home, and that's around the remains of 14 soldiers who died in the DRC, finally expected on home soil today. The handing over of these remains will be at Airforce Base in Swartkop, that's in Centurion. They'll also be given a memorial to pay homage to the departed troops. But what about the process of repatriating, let me say that again, the repatriation process, I beg your pardon, of their spirits? South Africa, of course, has a multicultural and diverse population with different lifestyles and practices. And many families believe in African spirituality that needs to perform particular rituals to fetch spirits of those who've passed on where they've died. For this, let's bring in Mkhulu Nsingiza, who's the CEO of the Zindzi Mandela Foundation and joins us now live. Mkhulu, thank you very much indeed for your time. Welcome to the agenda. Perhaps let's just begin with much needed context for people who aren't familiar with this life and this practice. What is it about African spirituality that you reckon stands out in this moment, especially when it comes to fetching the souls of those who've passed on from where they've died?
Yes, Kesha, good morning, and to the viewers. It stems from the belief that what constitutes a human being is both spirit and, the physical body. So therefore, when, the soul has departed from that body, remember that the soul lives on. It never dies. It's only the body that is no longer able to carry, that soul. So therefore, the soul is forever conscious. Therefore, it means that if, somebody passes on or departs, in a foreign land or in a car accident, in any violent manner, we are able to do a ritual of, firstly, when, we fetch the remains, we've got to make sure that there is a spiritual person that is carrying a Sizulu siyibiza ukuthi umlahlankosi or umphafa. That is then is going to be the vehicle for the spirit. So that person that is holding umlahlankosi is not supposed to communicate with anybody. Is supposed to communicate with the spirit because we believe the spirit is alive. Can hear us. When we pass a rivers, you report to the spirit, everything, that happens. And that person is not supposed to communicate to anybody until they reach the destiny, where they now combine both the physical or the remains of the deceased together, with the spirit.
According to this way of thinking, what is the consequence then, Mkhulu, of not necessarily undertaking the process of fetching someone's spirit, so to speak?
The consequence, it's a wandering spirit, a spirit, that is not settled. And, for the family as well to find closure. I'll make an example. With our late King Matiwan, who passed somewhere in KwaZulu Natal, Mkhulu. We had to go and identify the place. The remains are still there because it was buried with pit retif. But as among one community or nation, we went there where he passed on so that we are able to communicate, with that spirit and let them know that we are in the process of doing all the formal things so that, by the day the Department of Health assists us in identifying his bones, in his resting place, we will be able to combine the spirit and the body and take, the remains of King Matiwane back home in Bergville.
I'm sure, of course, our forefathers have imagined scenarios where it's simply not possible to merge a body and a spirit. And this perhaps might be a case in point where people die in combat, in wars. But there are other examples, Mkhulu. Some people go missing and are never found. There are instances where people are trapped below mines, for example. We know in Lily Mine, where it's impossible to get to their bodies. And the list really goes on and on. What happens in those scenarios?
I think when I just mere communication is enough, because remember that even our bodies, the spirit, we are a conglomerate of atoms. And atoms, they have, memory, and they are conscious. So therefore, if, in that situation, just your articulation, naming just that name, we are creating a vibrational frequency that will link with the spirit, of that person, because we firmly believe that in African spiritualism, there's no death. Because I am energy, even science confirms this. I am energy, I cannot be created, I cannot be destroyed, I'm forever there. And I keep changing, form every time I reincarnate. So therefore, just a communication, a dedication where you find your either you go ehlane like traditional healers do, where we are able to find a pure energy, surrounding us, and we are then able just to speak. Remember that when we speak, our voices create a vibrational frequency that will then be able, to be in sync with the spirit, of the deceased.
Sure. If we are energies that are never created or can never be destroyed, I think that opens up a whole manner of questions around whether newborn babies are really new, so to speak, and whether those who've passed on have ceased to exist. But perhaps I digress. Mkhulu Nsingiza, it's a story we'll have to unpack at a different time, unless you want to give a quick response to that.
Yes. That's why in the African culture, we respect even the child, because we know that the spirit that dwells within that child is older than the physical body. That is why we respect, that child, because the spirit that is there is much older.
All right, Mkhulu Nsingiza, perhaps we can have you back to unpack especially that aspect and many others around spirituality. Today's discussion, of course, was around just what ought to be involved in the mourning process for those who've lost their loved ones in the conflict in the DRC, as, of course, we await their handover and memorial service set to begin around 6 o'clock tonight. That's Mkhulu Nsingiza, CEO of the Zindzi Mandela Foundation. Thanks very much indeed.